Get out. We want our space. Eucharia's words cut through Mildred like a knife. Her own daughter-in-law, standing in the house she still owned, spoke to her that way. Her son, her only child, just stood there saying nothing. That moment changed everything. Sometimes betrayal comes from those closest to us. Mildred had found it while cleaning Philip's desk. Divorce papers Damien had left behind after their lunch. Her son hadn't said anything about his failing marriage. Yet there it was, proof of his crumbling world. She stared at her reflection in the antique mirror Philip had given her on their 40th anniversary. The past year had carved deeper lines around her eyes. "Mom, sorry I'm late," Damien said, rushing through the front door of her Victorian home in Westbrook. At 52, his hairline had started to recede like Philip's had, but his eyes still held that boyish sparkle. "Work was insane today." "It's fine, dear. Lunch is still warm." She hugged him, hiding what she had found. If he wanted to tell her, he would. Over chicken pot pie, his favorite since childhood, Damien finally spoke. "Mom, Eucharia and I have been seeing each other for a few months now." Mildred nearly choked on her water. "Linda's daughter, Eucharia James? I know it seems sudden after the divorce," Damien continued, "but we reconnected at that charity event last year." His eyes lit up in a way Mildred hadn't seen since his college days. "She's changed, Mom." Mildred remembered Eucharia as a child, beautiful, but always entitled and demanding attention. Linda had always made excuses for her daughter's behavior. Now in her late 40s, Eucharia had already gone through 2 marriages. "I'm happy if you're happy," Mildred lied, "because that's what mothers do." 3 months later, they were engaged. 6 months after that, Mildred was hosting their engagement dinner in her dining room, watching Eucharia parade around her home, eyeing her antiques like items at an auction. "This chandelier must be worth a fortune," Eucharia said, staring up at the crystal fixture Philip had installed himself. "It's not about the value," Mildred replied. "It's about the memories." After dinner, Damien pulled her aside. "Mom, I need to tell you something. We've been looking at apartments, but with the economy and my investments tanking." He couldn't meet her eyes. "What is it, Damien?" "We're struggling financially. I lost almost everything in that tech crash." Before Mildred could respond, Eucharia appeared and wrapped herself around Damien's arm. "Your mother doesn't need to worry about our problems." That night, as Mildred lay in bed thinking about Damien's situation, she made a decision that would change everything. She owned several investment properties that she and Philip had bought during his successful career as a corporate attorney. The colonial house on Maple Street was sitting empty. The next morning, she called Damien. "I have a solution for your housing situation," she said. "The colonial on Maple Street. You and Eucharia can live there as long as you need." His voice caught. "Mom, we couldn't. I insist. The property is just sitting there." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'll keep it in my name since it's part of my retirement plan, but it's yours to live in." Later that day, when they met at the property, Mildred handed Damien the keys. Eucharia walked through the house, her perfectly manicured finger tracing the original woodwork. "It's old-fashioned," she said with a thin smile, "but we can work with it." Damien embraced her tightly. "Thank you, Mom. We won't forget this." As Mildred drove home, a strange heaviness settled in her chest. She chalked it up to empty nest syndrome. Even though Damien had moved out decades ago, she had no idea she had just handed over the keys to what would become her prison of guilt, manipulation, and betrayal. It started with unanswered phone calls. Mildred would leave messages for Damien, and days would pass before he returned them. When she invited them for Sunday dinner, a tradition in their family for decades, there was always an excuse. Work commitments, previous engagements, Eucharia feeling under the weather. Mildred kept a small leather-bound journal, a habit from her years as a school principal. Tuesday, called Damien about dinner this weekend. Eucharia answered, said they were busy. Thursday, left another message. No response yet. She wasn't keeping score. She was trying to convince herself she wasn't imagining the growing distance. One Wednesday afternoon, Mildred prepared Damien's favorite lasagna and drove to their house. Her house, technically. She rang the doorbell, balancing the still warm dish in her hands, and waited. Eucharia opened the door, her smile faltering when she saw Mildred standing there. "Mildred, this is unexpected," she said, opening the door reluctantly. "I thought you might enjoy a home-cooked meal," Mildred said, stepping inside. The house looked different. The antique side table that had been in the entryway was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern console that didn't fit the colonial architecture. Damien came out from his home office, surprise showing on his face. "Mom, we weren't expecting you." Mildred gave a smile that felt too bright. "I was in the neighborhood and thought you might like some lasagna." "That's thoughtful," Eucharia said, taking the dish from her hands with a forced smile. "We actually just ordered takeout, but we can save this for tomorrow." Mildred followed them into the kitchen, noticing more changes. The vintage cabinet pulls had been replaced with shiny silver handles, and the warm cream walls were now plain white. While Damien excused himself to finish an email, Mildred heard Eucharia's voice in the hallway. She spoke in a low tone, but her words still reached the kitchen. "I can't believe she just showed up again. Can't we tell her to call before coming over? It's like we don't have any privacy anymore." The wooden spoon Mildred had used to stir her tea slipped from her hand and clattered against the cup. Her fingers felt shaky. Then she heard Damien's voice. "She's just being helpful. You know how she is." "It's suffocating," Eucharia whispered. "Your mother needs to understand boundaries." Quietly, Mildred picked up her purse and car keys. When they returned to the kitchen, she was already heading toward the door. "I should get going," she said, avoiding their eyes. "Enjoy the lasagna." "Mom, you don't have to leave," Damien said, but the relief in his voice was clear. On the drive home, tears blurred Mildred's vision. She had agreed they needed their space as newlyweds, but she hadn't expected to feel like a stranger in the house she owned, after bringing food she had made with love. That evening, she sat alone at the dining table, pushing food around her plate. The phone rang. It was Linda, Eucharia's mother and Mildred's friend for 50 years. "Mildred, how are you? We haven't spoken in weeks." Mildred thought about telling her what she had overheard, but her loyalty to Damien held her back. "I'm fine. Just adjusting to Damien being married again." "Eucharia seems so happy," Linda said. "She says the house is absolutely perfect." Mildred nodded, forgetting Linda couldn't see her. "Yes, it's a lovely home." After the call, she opened her journal and wrote, "Remember, they need their space. Call first next time." But the words felt like giving up something she couldn't name. Spring turned to summer, and her bond with Damien slowly faded like flowers without water. Their weekly phone calls became monthly. His visits, once like clockwork, became rare and precious. When they did meet, she noticed something troubling. Eucharia always led the conversation, often cutting Mildred off before she could finish speaking. "So, I've been volunteering at the literacy center downtown," Mildred said one afternoon during one of their few shared meals. "Speaking of downtown," Eucharia interrupted, "Damien and I saw this amazing modern art exhibit last weekend. You probably wouldn't have liked it, Mildred. It was very avant-garde." Damien nodded, not looking up from his plate. The same son who used to ask her opinion on everything, his essays, job choices, now seemed to need permission to speak in front of his wife. In November, Mildred prepared for Thanksgiving. She polished the silver passed down from Philip's family, set the table with her finest china, and cooked all of Damien's favorite dishes. They arrived an hour late. Eucharia walked in wearing a designer outfit that seemed too fancy for a family dinner. Her eyes moved across the room like she was inspecting something. "This place is exactly the same," she said, running a finger along the mahogany sideboard. "Don't you ever think about updating, Mildred? All these antiques make it feel like a museum." Mildred forced a smile. "I find comfort in familiar things." During dinner, Eucharia talked about her social events, naming people Mildred had never met, speaking about gatherings she hadn't been invited to. When Mildred served pumpkin pie, using Philip's old recipe, Eucharia set down her fork and looked directly at her. "Frankly, Mildred, a house this size for someone your age, it seems dangerous and wasteful." The room went quiet. Even the old grandfather clock stopped ticking for a moment. "I manage just fine," Mildred said, keeping her voice calm even though her throat felt tight. "There are some lovely retirement communities in Lexington," Eucharia continued. "Very upscale. You'd be around people your own age. I'm not ready for that yet." "Well, no one ever is ready to admit they're getting older," she said with a laugh, as if she had made a clever joke. "But really, what are you going to do with all these antiques and heirlooms?" "I've always planned to pass them down to Damien," Mildred replied, glancing at her son, who suddenly became very interested in his pie. Eucharia waved her hand. "We don't need to clutter our space with old things. They probably aren't worth much anyway." Damien cleared his throat but said nothing. He didn't defend the treasures he used to admire, or the mother who had kept them safe for him. After they left, Mildred noticed her grandmother's diamond brooch was missing from the display cabinet. It had been there that morning when she dusted. She looked everywhere, telling herself she must have misplaced it. She refused to consider the other possibility. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Missing diamond brooch. Also missing the son who would have once helped me look for it." Her 79th birthday came with clear skies and bright sun. Mildred made coffee and checked her phone, expecting a message from Damien. Nothing. By noon, she had received calls from many friends, including Marcy, her old colleague. But her only child stayed silent. "He's probably planning something special," she told herself, remembering how Damien had always made her birthdays feel important. Even after Philip died, Damien had kept the tradition, bringing cake and insisting they celebrate. By evening, there was still nothing. Determination took over Mildred's disappointment. She baked her own birthday cake, lemon with buttercream frosting, just like Philip used to make for her. Then she dressed in her favorite blue dress. She wasn't going to let Damien's forgetfulness ruin her day. She drove to their house, her house, with the cake on the passenger seat. As she turned onto Maple Street, she saw several cars parked outside. Lights shone from every window, and music was playing. Confused, she walked to the front door and rang the bell. The sound of laughter suddenly stopped. Footsteps came closer, and Damien opened the door. His happy expression quickly changed to shock. "Mom, what are you doing here?" She stood still. The cake felt heavy in her hands. Behind him, she saw the dining room table set for a dinner party. Champagne glasses sparkled under the chandelier. "It's my birthday," she said. Her voice sounded small. Eucharia appeared beside him, holding a glass in her hand. "Mildred, what a surprise," she said in a bright fake tone. "Oh dear, is it your birthday? We had no idea." Through the doorway, Mildred saw Linda among the guests. Her face showed embarrassment and pity. Their eyes met for a second, then Linda looked away. "We're celebrating Damien's promotion," Eucharia said. "If only you'd called first. We could have included you in our plans." Damien at least looked a little ashamed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. With everything going on at work, I completely forgot." Mildred handed him the cake. She forced a smile, though it felt like her face might crack. "It's nothing. Enjoy your celebration. Congratulations on the promotion. Won't you come in?" Damien asked, but his voice didn't really mean it. No, I don't want to interrupt your party. I just thought." Her voice faded. What had she thought? That her son would remember her birthday? That she meant enough to get a phone call? "Another time then," Eucharia said, already closing the door. "Happy birthday, Mildred." She drove home slowly, tears blurring her view of the road. At a stoplight, she glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. An old woman, alone, on her birthday. Philip would have been heartbroken to see her like this. Her strong husband, who had always taught Damien about respect and family. At home, she sat in the dark. No candles to blow out, no wishes to make. Her phone made a sound. It was a text from Damien. "So sorry about tonight, Mom. Let's have dinner next week to celebrate your birthday. Love you." She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her journal and wrote, "Today I turned 79. Today I also realized that in my son's new life, there is no room for his mother." Then the tears came, deep, painful sobs that left her gasping for air. She cried for the little boy who used to make her birthday cards with crayon hearts. For the young man who once drove 4 hours from college just to surprise her. And for the middle-aged stranger who had completely forgotten her. 2 months passed slowly. Following Eucharia's rules, Mildred called ahead to plan a visit. She held the health insurance papers Damien had asked for. Each ring of the phone made her stomach tighter. "Mildred," Eucharia answered, her voice cold and businesslike. "Yes, tomorrow at 2 will be fine." The next day, Mildred arrived right on time. She carried the documents neatly arranged in a leather portfolio. Philip had given it to her for their 30th anniversary. The Colonial's driveway was full of construction trucks. A dumpster sat where her carefully tended front lawn had been. She stepped around a pile of wood to get to the front door, which was open. Inside, the once beautiful entryway was a mess. Plastic sheets hung in doorways. The air was thick with dust from plaster. "Hello," she called, stepping over power cords carefully. Damien came out of the living room, wearing a dress shirt that looked strange among the chaos. "Mom, Thanks for bringing those papers. What's happening here? She asked, trying not to sound upset. Just some renovations, he said quickly. Eucharia's in the back. Come on through. She followed him, her heart sinking as she looked around. The original wooden floors were being covered with modern tiles. The crown molding she and Philip had carefully restored was gone. Then she stopped. The workers were removing the stained glass panels from the bay window. The same panels that had lit the room with blue and amber light for over 100 years. Damien, what are they doing with the stained glass? Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Before he could answer, Eucharia appeared, wearing a hard hat like it was part of an outfit. Mildred, perfect timing, she said. What do you think of our modernization project? Mildred tried to find words that didn't show her shock. It's quite a change. We're bringing this old place into the 21st century, Eucharia said proudly. Those old stained glass windows are the first to go. But those windows are what made Philip and I fall in love with this house, Mildred said. She watched a worker carelessly lean one of the glass panels against a wall. They're special parts of this house. It's even listed in the historic register because of details like that. Eucharia's smile faded. You said we could live here as we wanted. I said you could live here, Mildred replied, her voice firm now. Not destroy parts of history. Is there a problem? A man in a suit walked over with a clipboard. No problem, Eucharia said quickly. My mother-in-law is just surprised by the changes. Actually, Mildred said, straightening up, I'm wondering if you've gotten the right permits to change a historic building. The contractor looked confused. Mrs. Wilson, I was told you approved all these changes. I did no such thing, Mildred replied, turning to Damien, who suddenly became very interested in his shoes. Eucharia's face turned red. You gave us this house. I allowed you to live in this house, she said clearly. The deed is still in my name. That means legally, you need my approval for structural changes. That's it, Eucharia shouted, her calm look disappearing. We always knew there were strings attached. This is exactly why we never invite you over. Get out. We want our space. The contractor stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. Damien finally looked up, but not at Eucharia, at her. I think it's better if you go, Mom, he said quietly. We'll talk later. She handed him the insurance papers and walked out. Her legs trembled with each step. In her car, she saw that her hands were shaking. But it wasn't from sadness or fear. It was from anger. Pure, clear anger. As she gripped the steering wheel, something inside her became calm. For the first time in months, she felt clear. This wasn't about a house or stained glass windows. It was about respect. About limits that had been ignored for too long. She started the engine. Her decision was already made. The time for turning the other cheek was over. Mildred, you need to check your financial statements, Marcy said, handing her a cup of tea. They sat in Marcy's sunlit kitchen, the one place where she felt safe enough to fall apart completely. After leaving Damien and Eucharia's house, she had driven straight to Marcy's. Her friend of 40 years, retired lawyer and old workmate, listened without interrupting while Mildred told her everything. The distance between her and Damien, the birthday disaster, and the fight about the house renovations. This isn't just about them being rude, Marcy said, her sharp legal mind already seeing things Mildred had not. Something doesn't make sense. The cost of the renovations you described would be huge. Where is that money coming from if Damien told you they're having financial problems? The question stayed in the air between them. It was hard to even think about, but it had to be asked. The next morning, Mildred called Mr. Ken, her accountant since Philip died. His reply came fast, and it worried her. I've been trying to reach you for months, Mrs. Wilson. 2 hours later, she sat in his office. He laid out papers across his desk. We've seen some strange activity, he said, pointing to parts of the documents he had highlighted. I sent many notices to your home address. When you didn't reply, I thought maybe you had cleared it up with the banks directly. Her stomach turned. I never got any notices. He nodded with a serious look. That's what I was afraid of. What came next felt like a nightmare slowly becoming real. Credit cards had been opened in her name. Cards she had never applied for. Small amounts of money had been taken again and again, $200 here, $500 there, from different accounts. It added up to more than $65,000 over 18 months. The pattern is clear, Mr. Ken said, showing her a calendar where he had tracked the transactions. Most of these happened within 24 hours after your son and his wife visited you. Mildred felt her face go cold. That's impossible. There's more, he said, not wanting to continue. I asked a private investigator I trust to look into it. He pushed another folder toward her. He found these among your private papers when he visited your home office yesterday. Inside were forms for transferring property. They were half filled out. At the bottom was what looked like her signature. I never signed these, she whispered, staring at the careful fake. The investigator thought you'd want to know immediately, Mr. Ken said gently. Do you remember your son asking you to sign anything recently? A memory came back. Damien had been sitting at her kitchen table 3 weeks earlier. There had been a pile of papers between them. These are just insurance forms, Mom. Sign where I marked while I take this call. She had signed them without reading. She'd been distracted. Linda had just called about her husband's health. What do I do? Her own voice sounded strange to her. First, we protect your money, Mr. Ken said firmly. Then we write everything down. After that, you'll need to decide whether to go to the police. Criminal charges. Against her only child. It didn't feel real. As Mr. Ken explained how to secure her accounts, a thought passed through the shock. Philip would be heartbroken, but he wouldn't be surprised. He had always worried about Damien's lack of care with money, and how easily others could lead him. One more thing, Mr. Ken said, closing the folders. The investigator noticed your mail seems to have been opened or taken. I suggest we move all your financial mail to a P.O. box right away. On the drive home, she passed the Colonial on Maple Street. Her house. Her mistake. The construction trucks were still there, breaking it down, piece by piece, just like Damien and Eucharia had been breaking her down. That night, she didn't write in her journal. Instead, she opened her safe and took out Philip's pocket watch, the only thing he had asked her to keep close. Inside the cover was his favorite quote, written in his neat handwriting. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. For the first time in months, she slept without crying. The market is strong right now, Michael, her real estate agent, told her as they sat in his office. Homes in historic areas are in high demand. 3 days had passed since Mildred's meeting with Mr. Ken. 3 days of careful planning, quiet anger, and rediscovering her strength. The strength she had carried with pride during 30 years as a school principal, but somehow lost after becoming a widow. I want a discreet sale, she explained. Private listings only. Serious buyers. Richard nodded and wrote notes. And the current occupants? He asked. My lawyer will handle the notification, she said. Mr. Emmanuel had made it clear. As the legal owner, and with no formal rental agreement in place, she only needed to notify the people living there that she planned to sell. She wasn't required to offer them first refusal or share any detailed timelines. May I ask what made you decide this? Richard asked kindly. His eyes were soft behind his glasses. They had known each other since he sold Philip and her their Victorian home many years ago. Let's just say I'm simplifying my investment portfolio, she answered. It was a half-truth, and it tasted bitter in her mouth. That afternoon, she made 2 more appointments. One with the bank to open new accounts that only she could reach. The other with an art teacher. If she was rebuilding her life at 79, she might as well finally try watercolor painting. Something she had always wanted to do. The official letter to Damien and Eucharia went out the next day. Certified mail, with signature required, just as Mr. Emmanuel had advised. The message was simple and direct. This letter serves as official notification that the property at 247 Maple Street may be listed for sale. Further information will be provided as it becomes available. She imagined Eucharia's face when she opened it. The thought didn't make her happy, only gave her a strong sense of finally taking control. Meanwhile, the financial expert hired by Mr. Ken was documenting each illegal transaction. The case was growing, strong enough to be shown to the police if needed. The proof was clear. Her name had been used to open 3 credit cards. Her accounts had been emptied little by little. Her mail had been taken to hide what was happening. Everything pointed to Damien and Eucharia. That Friday, Mildred went to her first watercolor class at the community center. Surrounded by other seniors, she dipped her brush into a blue color and made her first soft stroke on the paper. The color spread out like a flower, unplanned, beautiful. That's it, the instructor said gently. She was a kind woman with silver hair. Don't try to control it all the way. Water does what it wants. Mildred thought about how she had tried to control everything after Philip died. her sadness, her loneliness, her fear of being a burden to Damien. That control had become surrender, to Eucharia's tricks, to Damien's coldness. No more. That evening, Marcy called. "How are you doing?" "I'm painting," Mildred said, laughing a little. "Terribly. But I'm painting. Mildred Wilson, the artist. I like it." Then Marcy's voice became serious. "Any reply to the letter?" "Not yet." "Get ready," Marcy warned. "People like Eucharia don't give up easily." Marcy was right. The next morning, Mildred's phone rang. It was Linda's number. "Mildred." Her voice was tense. "Eucharia just called me very upset. She says you're selling their house without any warning." "That can't be true." "It's my house, Linda," Mildred replied calmly. "And they got the official letter yesterday. But they've made it their home. They've spent so much on fixing it up. Unauthorized changes to a home they don't own," Mildred said firmly. There was a long silence. Years of friendship now felt thin like paper. "Mildred, are you sure you're thinking clearly?" Linda asked at last. "Eucharia says you've been confused lately. Forgetting things." Mildred felt her heart turn cold. So that was their plan. Make her look like an old woman who couldn't handle her own life. "I've never been more clear," she said. "Maybe you should ask your daughter about the credit cards opened in my name. Or about the $65,000 taken from my accounts." This time, the silence felt different. "I need to go," Linda said slowly. I'll call you later." Mildred hung up and looked at her half-finished painting. The blue had touched the purple, creating something new and unexpected at the edges. The first post showed up on a family support forum. Worried about elderly mother-in-law being manipulated by bad advisors. How can we protect her money from people taking advantage of her confusion? Linda sent it to her with a simple message. "Is this what I think it is?" It was clearly Eucharia's opening move. The post was careful, not directly accusing anyone, but specific enough that anyone who knew them would guess who it was about. More posts followed on different websites. In Eucharia's version of the story, Mildred was a confused old woman being tricked by greedy outsiders into selling her house. Damien was the loving son, trying to protect his mother while still giving her space. The comments online mostly supported Eucharia's story. "You might need to go to court and ask for guardianship. Start keeping notes on her confusion." Mildred showed the posts to Mr. Emmanuel. He only raised one eyebrow. "Predictable. And a mistake," he said. "She's building a trail of evidence online that shows what she's trying to do." On Thursday evening, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Linda stood on the porch, looking uncomfortable. "May I come in?" "I think we need to talk," she said. Mildred led her to the living room where they had shared many cups of tea over 50 years of friendship. Today, she offered nothing. "Eucharia and Damien had a meeting with Dr. Sutton yesterday," Linda began without pause. "The geriatric specialist?" Mildred asked. Linda nodded, not meeting her eyes. "They're exploring ways to evaluate if you're able to manage your financial affairs." Mildred had suspected this from the online posts, but hearing it said out loud gave her a cold feeling inside. "I see," she said, surprised her voice stayed calm. "And what do you think about that, Linda?" Linda looked up then, her face filled with worry. "I don't know what to think anymore. Eucharia says you've been acting strangely, forgetting things, making wild accusations. But you seem perfectly fine to me right now." "Maybe because I am fine," Mildred replied. "Maybe the only thing that's changed is that I've stopped letting them take advantage of me." She handed Linda the folder Mr. Ken had prepared. It showed a timeline of the financial fraud, with all the supporting documents. Linda hesitated before taking it. "I can't believe Eucharia would do something like this," she whispered, but her voice didn't sound sure. "Neither could I at first." Linda looked through the folder, bank statements, credit reports, and fake property transfer papers. The proof was clear. Her hands shook a little as she closed the folder. "There must be some explanation. I'm sure Damien and Eucharia will have plenty," Mildred said. "The real question is whether you'll believe them or your own eyes." After Linda left, Mildred stood at the window and watched her drive away. Their friendship was now hanging by a thread. Linda had always made excuses for Eucharia's actions, from when she was a child throwing tantrums, to now as an adult manipulating others. Would this proof finally make her see the truth? The next day, Richard called with news. A potential buyer wants to view the property. They're only in town for the weekend. "Is there any way we can arrange a showing?" According to Mr. Emmanuel, Mildred had to give Damien and Eukarya reasonable notice before any showings. She called right away. Damien answered. His voice was tight. A showing? Mom, we're in the middle of renovations. The renovations you didn't have permission to start, she reminded him. The buyers are only available tomorrow at 11 o'clock. This is ridiculous. We can't just leave when you say so. Eukarya has a brunch planned. The formal notice will be delivered this afternoon, she said, keeping her voice calm. I do hope you'll make the property look decent. That night, she got a text from Linda. We need to talk again tomorrow after your house showing. So Linda had already heard about it. The connection between mother and daughter stayed strong, even after everything Linda had seen in the folder. Mildred replied with a simple yes, trying to quiet the voice in her head that warned her she might lose her oldest friend and her only child. They've offered 15% above asking, Richard said. His voice came through the phone, full of energy. With one condition, occupancy within 60 days. 2 months had passed since the first showing. 3 serious buyers had come to see the house. Each time, Damien and Eukarya made it hard, pointing out fake structural issues, talking about crimes that never happened in the neighborhood, and leaving their things all over the place to make it look like the home couldn't be sold. But the colonial's beautiful bones and historic charm still caught the eye of a retired couple from Chicago. They were art collectors who looked past the half-done modern updates and saw the home's real value. It's a great offer for this market, Richard said. Shall I accept? Mildred looked at the calendar hanging on her kitchen wall. 60 days meant Damien and Eukarya would have to move out by mid-August. Hot weather, moving trucks, the shame of being forced out. She could almost feel Eukarya's anger and Damien's bitterness. Accept it, she said firmly. Ask Mr. Emmanuel to prepare the official notice for the people living there. Just as she hung up, the house phone rang. The new private line that the investigators had installed. Mrs. Wilson? This is Tina Martinez. I used to be your husband's assistant at the firm. The name sparked a memory. Tina had been a very organized young woman who kept Philip's messy office running like clockwork. Of course, Tina. How are you? I'm fine, but I'm calling about you. I saw some worrying posts online that seemed to talk about your situation. Her voice dropped to a softer tone. I recognized your daughter-in-law's name. Eukarya James, right? Yes, Mildred confirmed, wondering where this was going. Mrs. Wilson, I don't know if you remember, but before I worked for Mr. Wilson, I worked at Brighton Bank. I recognized Ms. James because, well, there was an incident. Mildred's hand tightened around the phone as Tina began to explain. Years ago, while working at the bank, Eukarya had been investigated for financial misconduct involving an elderly client. The case was dropped due to lack of evidence, but Tina remembered it clearly because Philip had been involved. He offered free legal help to the alleged victim. After I started working for your husband, Tina explained over the phone, I realized he kept a file on Miss James. He never said why, but he updated it now and then. A file, Mildred repeated, her thoughts spinning. Do you know what happened to it after he died? That's why I'm calling, Tina said. When I saw those online posts, I checked my own records. I kept copies of a few sensitive files when the firm closed after Mr. Wilson's death. It was standard practice. I have the James file. Within hours, a courier delivered a sealed envelope to Mildred's door. Inside was Philip's familiar handwriting on manila folders, each one organized just the way he used to do it. James E. Possible financial elder abuse monitor. Philip had written a detailed history of Eukarya's jobs at 3 different financial institutions. Each one ended in unclear circumstances. She was never charged, but each time there was an internal investigation. Each case involved elderly clients who had large amounts of money. The most chilling part was a note from Philip, written 2 months before he died. Linda's friendship with Mildred makes things harder. But if EJ ever becomes involved with the Wilson family's finances, this file should be given to the authorities immediately. Mildred's hands shook as she read his warning from beyond the grave. Philip had seen what she hadn't. The pattern, the risk, the danger behind Eukarya's friendly act. Even after his death, he was still trying to protect her. She called Mr. Emmanuel right away to update their legal plan. This shows a clear pattern, Mr. Emmanuel said. It will help our case a lot. That evening, while she worked on her watercolor, a sunset over the ocean that her instructor had praised. Her phone lit up with a message from Linda. Need to talk. It's important. Can I come over tomorrow? There's something you should know. Mildred stared at the message, wondering what Linda had found out, what she believed now, and if their 50-year friendship could survive the truth about her daughter. Come at 2, she finally replied. Then she set down her brush and looked at the painting, where the sun was melting into the sea, creating a horizon both beautiful and uncertain. The next day, she carefully arranged 4 folders on the coffee table. Each one was labeled in her neat handwriting. Financial fraud, property documents, Philip's file, and sale contract. They were like square-shaped proof of betrayal and truth. The last 2 years of her life were laid out clearly on paper. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Mildred opened it and found not only Linda, as expected, but also Damien and Eucharia. They were at my house when I texted you, Linda said awkwardly. I thought it might be better to talk about everything together. The tension in the room was strong as Mildred led them to the living room. Linda looked upset. Damien looked pale. Eucharia wore the tight smile Mildred now knew meant she was ready for a fight. Mom, what's going on? Damien asked as they sat across from her. Linda says you wanted to talk to all of us. Actually, Mildred said calmly, I believe Linda had something to talk about with me first. Linda straightened up. Yes, I've been looking into a few things since our last talk. She glanced at Eucharia, whose smile was now gone. I found some things that don't add up. Mother, we've already talked about this, Eucharia interrupted. Mildred is confused about a lot of things lately. That's why we're worried. Mildred stayed quiet, watching the way Linda reacted to her daughter. Something had changed. Linda wasn't just agreeing with her anymore. I spoke with Diane Miller yesterday, Linda continued, turning back to Mildred. You remember my cousin at First National? She helped me understand a few banking rules. Some things in your documents didn't make sense. Eucharia stood up quickly. This is ridiculous. We came here because Linda said you wanted to talk about the house calmly, not for more wild claims. Please sit down, Eucharia, Mildred said. Her voice was firm. No one has accused you of anything, yet. That word, yet, hung in the air. Damien shifted in his seat. Mom, please be fair. We've spent thousands fixing up the Colonial. You can't just sell it out from under us. Thousands that you said you didn't have when I offered you the house, Mildred replied. Strange, isn't it? She opened the first folder and placed a bank statement on the table. This shows that $65,000 was taken from my accounts over 18 months. Every withdrawal matches the timing of your visits. Damien went pale. That's not possible. Mildred opened the second folder. This is a property transfer document with my name forged on it, she said. You asked me to sign it, Damien. You said it was for insurance. I never, he started, then stopped, looking at Eucharia. She opened the third folder and took out Philip's file. And this is the most surprising. My late husband kept detailed records about Eucharia's past at 3 banks. Every time, it involved elderly clients and serious money concerns. Eucharia jumped up and reached for the file, but Linda caught her arm. Stop it. Just stop, Eucharia. You believe this senile old woman over your own daughter? Eucharia hissed. What I believe, Linda said quietly, is the evidence I've seen, and the pattern I've ignored for far too long. The room went quiet as Linda turned to her, tears in her eyes. After our last conversation, she said softly, I contacted Eucharia's former employers. They couldn't tell me much, confidentiality rules, but their silence said a lot. She looked down for a moment, then continued. Then I found records of payments from our family account to 3 different people over the years. Settlements, Mildred. My husband and I paid money to keep Eucharia's mistakes quiet. Eucharia's face twisted with anger. You had no right to go through Dad's financial records, she snapped. I had every right, Linda replied calmly. They're my records too. Mildred opened the final folder and placed the sale contract on the table. The Colonial has been sold, she said. The new owners take possession in 60 days. You can't do that, Eucharia shouted. We'll fight this in court. We'll have you declared incompetent. With what evidence? Mildred asked quietly. The word of a woman with a history of financial elder abuse? Or maybe my confused son, who can't explain how the renovations were paid for, or why his signature appears on credit card applications in my name. Damien stared at the documents spread out before him, his face going pale. I didn't know, he whispered, looking up at her with the same eyes she remembered from when he was a boy. Mom, I swear, I didn't know about the accounts. For the first time, Mildred saw doubt flicker in Eucharia's perfect mask. It cracked just a little. Maybe not all of it, she said to Damien. But you knew enough. You chose to look away instead of standing up for your mother. You chose comfort over doing what's right. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 4 times. The sound marked the hour, and the end of all lies. In the silence that followed, Mildred looked at her son and saw him clearly for the first time in years. Not the perfect image she had held onto, but the real man, flawed and lost, who had failed them both. What happens now? Linda asked softly. Now, Mildred said, gathering the folders, we each make our choices. The legal agreement was simple. In return for Mildred not pressing criminal charges, Eucharia would give up any claim to her property or money. She would admit to using Mildred's identity without permission and agree not to contact her again. It's a generous offer, Mr. Emmanuel had said earlier. More generous than I would recommend, honestly. I'm not trying to see my son's wife go to jail, Mildred had told him. I just want to close this chapter. 3 weeks had passed since that day in the living room. 3 weeks of careful talks through lawyers. 3 weeks of long, honest conversations with Linda as they began rebuilding their friendship. 3 weeks of silence from Damien. The day after their confrontation, he had moved out of the Colonial and into a small apartment downtown. His divorce made it into the local newspaper, a quiet scandal among their social group. But nothing compared to what might have happened if Mildred had pressed charges. She signed the agreement while Mr. Emmanuel's assistant notarized it. The act itself felt almost small after all the emotional storms. Still, Mildred felt strangely lighter as she set the pen down. It's done, Mr. Emmanuel said. Ms. James's lawyer already has her signature. This settles all legal matters between you. Except, of course, the most important one, her relationship with her son. That evening, Linda came over for dinner. It was their first try at normal life again. Eucharia is moving to Arizona next week, Linda said as she helped clear the dishes. My sister is letting her stay while she figures things out. How are you handling it? Mildred asked. She was truly concerned. Linda sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter. Some days are harder than others. I keep asking myself how I missed the signs, how I let it all go on for so long. We see what we want to see in our children, Mildred replied, thinking of Damien. Have you heard from him? Linda shook her head. Not since he moved out, but he will, when he's ready to face what happened. The next morning, Mildred went to a meeting of the financial literacy group that Marcy had encouraged her to join. The group was made up of seniors who had been taken advantage of financially. They shared their stories and helped each other find support and answers. The leader of the group, a retired banker named Greg, had invited her to speak. Standing in front of 15 older men and women, some still clearly shaken by their own stories, Mildred felt a new sense of purpose. My name is Mildred, she began. And until recently, I thought being kind meant staying quiet. I thought loving my family meant letting them treat me however they wanted. People nodded. She went on. My late husband once told me that integrity isn't just about telling the truth. It's about being whole. It means being yourself fully and honestly, without giving up your values. She took a deep breath. It took me 79 years and a painful betrayal to finally understand what he meant. For the next hour, she shared her full story. Not just the stolen money and lies, but how it had made her feel, how confused she had been, how she had gone from pain to strength. When she finished, the room was quiet for a few seconds. Then an elderly man raised his hand. How did you find the courage to confront your own son? He asked gently. The question hit her deeply. I realized, she said slowly, that by letting him keep doing what he was doing, I wasn't helping him. Real love means telling the truth. It means stopping the harm, even if it hurts. As the meeting ended, several members came to her to talk privately. They shared their own stories. She gave out her phone number, promised to come again next week. She felt a new connection forming, a community built on truth, healing, and support. That afternoon, her doorbell rang without warning. Damien stood on the porch. His face was thin, his eyes red. Mom, he said, his voice breaking with just that one word. She stepped aside to let him in. She noticed how much he had aged in only 3 weeks. His shoulders were slumped. New lines had appeared around his mouth. In the living room, he sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped between his knees like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. I don't even know where to begin, he said at last. To say I'm sorry feels like it's not enough. It is, she replied gently. But it's a start. I've been seeing a therapist, he continued, trying to understand how I let things get this bad. Why I didn't see what Eukarya was doing. Why I didn't protect you. And what have you learned? She asked. He looked up at her, really meeting her eyes for the first time. That I've spent my whole life looking for someone to take care of me the way you did. That I confused control with love. That I was so scared of disappointing you, I couldn't admit failure. Even when the only other choice was to betray everything you taught me. His honesty caught her off guard. It softened her. I forgive you, Damien, she said quietly. But forgiveness doesn't take away the consequences. He nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. I know. I'm not expecting things to go back to the way they were. I couldn't let another day pass without telling you how sorry I am. And how ashamed. As he stood to leave, she stayed seated, watching her only child walk toward the door. Damien, she called softly. He turned, hope flickering on his face. We need time. It wasn't everything he wanted. It wasn't everything she wanted either. But it was honest. And for now, that would have to be enough. The garden was full of late summer roses. Their sweet smell mixed with the scent of freshly cut grass and the lemon tarts Marcy had brought for the fundraiser. Canvas tents gave shade to the 80 guests scattered around her backyard. Each one wore a name tag and held a program for the first annual Secure Seniors benefit. In just 3 years, the small support group Mildred had joined had grown into a known organization. It offered education, help, and a strong voice for elderly people who had been financially abused. Today's event was meant to raise money for their newest project, a peer counseling program for seniors rebuilding their lives. Mildred, the press is here, Linda called, waving to her from the garden gate. A young reporter stood there with a photographer. At 82, Mildred moved slower than she used to. But her mind was sharp, and she knew exactly what she stood for. The reporter looked fresh out of college, full of questions, scribbling notes as Mildred explained the group's mission and how often elder financial abuse really happened. What would you say to seniors who are scared to speak up about being mistreated by their own families? She asked. I'd tell them that real family respects your limits, Mildred replied. Real family doesn't use you, and it's never too late to get your dignity back. When the interview ended, she looked out at the crowd, nodding at the faces she had come to know well. Greg, from the first support group. He was now the group's treasurer. Marcy, who helped write new laws to punish elder fraud. Mr. Ken, whose accounting firm now offered free advice to seniors. And Linda, who had taken all her guilt about Eukarya and turned it into hard work for the cause. She didn't notice the man at first, the one who slipped in quietly through the side gate and stood near the edge of the group. It was Marcy who spotted him. She touched Mildred's arm and nodded in his direction. Damien stood alone. He looked thinner than she remembered. His hair had turned completely gray. In his hands, he held something small and brown, a book. I didn't know if I should come, he said when she walked over. Your invitation said it was open to the public. I'm glad you're here, she said. And she meant it. The last 3 years had been a slow, careful rebuilding. They started with monthly lunches, then moved to weekly phone calls. Damien had kept going to therapy. He was learning how Eukarya had fooled him, and she had learned how to love him with clear eyes. Not out of guilt or duty, but truth. I found this, he said, holding out the brown leather book. It was in one of the boxes Eukarya left behind. She never came to get it after the divorce. Mildred recognized it right away. Philip's journal, the one that had vanished after his death. She took it, Damien explained. His voice was tight with old anger. After the funeral, when we were going through Dad's office, she was scared it might have something in it about her. Mildred's fingers shook a little as she took the book. She could feel Philip in it, in the worn leather cover, in the neat gold initials pressed into the corner. There's more, Damien said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out an old envelope, yellow with time. They were inside the journal, he said. Letters from Dad. One for each of us. He meant for us to read them after he died. Letters that Eukarya had stolen, afraid of what they might say. I didn't read yours, Damien said. But mine. His voice broke. He knew, Mom. Somehow he knew I would struggle after he was gone. He told me to choose honesty over ease. He said real wealth isn't about money or stuff. Damien had learned that lesson the hard way. All around them, the fundraiser carried on. Friends and strangers shared the same purpose. The group that had started from her pain was now helping so many others start over. Would you like some lemonade? She asked, pointing toward the refreshments. Marcy brought those lemon squares you always liked. It was a small gesture, but after all they had been through, it felt like something big. A bridge over a long divide. Damien gave a small nod and walked beside her. They joined a table where Linda was sitting with Greg and his wife. She introduced everyone. Conversation flowed. Damien listened as Greg talked about their new project. He gave thoughtful ideas from his own work as a project manager. You should come to our next planning meeting, Linda said with a smile. We could really use someone with your skills. Damien looked over at Mildred, unsure. It's a good idea, she said, if you're interested. As the afternoon faded into evening and guests began to leave, Mildred found herself alone on the patio with Philip's journal resting in her lap. The letter Damien had given her lay unopened beside it. The garden was quiet now, with only the soft sounds of cleanup crews in the distance and Marcy directing volunteers. She opened the envelope slowly and carefully, unfolding the pages covered in Philip's distinct handwriting. My dearest Mildred, it began. If you're reading this, I am gone, but my love for you remains. My greatest wish is that you and Damien will remember what truly matters. Not the houses or investments we've gathered, but the honesty and values you live by. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept reading. Philip's last words were full of love, guidance, and belief in her strength. In the final paragraph he had written, remember that it's never too late to begin again, to stand firmly in your truth, to create a life that reflects your values rather than others' expectations. She folded the letter gently and placed it back into the journal as the setting sun stretched long shadows across the garden. Philip had been right, he often was. It wasn't too late. Not at 79, when she had finally stood up for herself. Not at 82, as she helped others do the same. Mom. Damien stood at the patio door. Need any help with these last tables? That would be nice, she said, sliding the letter into the journal and getting up to stand beside her son. They worked quietly together, side by side. The silence between them was warm and easy. Mildred thought about the long path that had led them here. Yes, the betrayal and pain, but also the clarity and purpose that had grown from it. She thought about the colonial house, now restored by the new owners. They had added vintage stained glass windows that looked like the ones that were there before. She thought about Eukarya, who, according to Linda, was now working at a resort in Arizona, still chasing shortcuts to security. But most of all, she thought about the words she always told the seniors who came to their organization looking for help. Life is too long to carry resentment, and too short to waste on people who don't see your worth. It had taken her 82 years to really understand that. But as Philip would say, better late than never.